Good evening, everybody. Right, welcome everybody. So this is to celebrate the launch of the second volume of the Bright Report. If you don't know what that is, the Bright Report is a collection of short stories, all slightly themed as if it's written for a fictional journal that looks at various fields of human endeavor. This time, we have stories of music and the paranormal and antiques and much more. And without further ado, I'm going to read us a little extract to give you a taste of what's in the second volume. So I present to you the music story, which is the first story you'll find and also the first one that's available in the preview on Amazon, so I'm not spoiling anything too much. So, and everybody can hear me, right? Guessing so. If you can't hear me, let me know. Okay. Hello. All right, so I present to you the first story in Volume 2. Murky, Dishwater, and the Quest for Peace. While the gods of rock and roll may have given their blessing to similar groups, Murky, Dishwater could be said to be cursed. Brought together by a love of 60s progressive rock, long hair, and homebrew beer, the group seemed to be the perfect match, on paper at least. The band was made up of the following members: Alex Barksdale, bass guitarist; Shannon Barksdale Jr., drummer and Alex's younger brother; Cole Hank Blank, electric guitarist and sound engineer; finally, Franklin Morse, lead vocalist and pan flutist. They occasionally featured Franklin's classically trained sister Dot, but she was not considered a main member. Her operatic style is said to clash interestingly with the band's garage aesthetic. They started off, as some bands do, by playing covers. It works for the Stones, said Shannon. Their takes on the classical songs proved to be too unique, as Catherine Quaver, music critic at the Timely Journal, put it. Band leader Franklin explains, turns out that adding a yodeling section to Stairway put people off. Or I'll say, Alex said, some people became physically sick. And none of us can really yodel, said Shannon. Hank merely nodded. I thought he was distracted by the Les Paul he was restringing, but Alex, who acted as a kind of translator for Hank's grunts and esoteric gestures, said that he meant we just hadn't found our feet and our voices yet. Not that that made anything clear, I carried on questioning them. In any event, the Murky Dishwater's experimental style was unsuitable for even the most malleable of covers. They needed their own sound. We were overflowing with ideas, said Alex. We could sketch riffs and work up a beat in no time. Full 4 time, Shannon corrected. Sometimes we changed from 6/8 to 7/8 and back and forth, just a few times a track, mind. We ain't Dream Theater. But we know 4/4 best, said Franklin. Hank grunted, but Alex ignored him. Anyway, he continued, instrumentally, we were all right, but the lyrics, man, we weren't anywhere. Apparently, after a few false starts, Hank suggested that they ditch Franklin. He believed, Hank began, but was interrupted by a grunt from the guitarist. Sorry, I stand corrected. He continued. He believes that you don't need lyrics, especially if you have a gifted guitarist. But Franklin had a license and a van, said Shannon. And style, Franklin added. No one met his gaze. It was then that I noticed that the tuxedo number he was wearing was in fact an entirely knitted onesie. Murky Dishwater was faced with a difficult choice. Remain a garage band forever or get driven to gigs. Franklin had to become a lyricist overnight. My expertise was in IT, he explained. I could unfreeze your PC, not write poetry. But something did change one fateful night. The beer ran out, said Shannon gravely. In the middle of an all-night jam session, Alex said. As I was stuck on finding a rhyme for Python, I volunteered to get some, said Franklin. What happened next not only changed the band's destiny, but also the course of rock history. It was almost midnight when Franklin rumbled down a dark street in his beat-up van. The fatigue and the stress of not being able to connect syllable and sound made him stall the van. I rolled into the middle of a crossroads. No other car in sight. It was spooky as all get out, man, said Franklin. Kept trying and trying, I just couldn't start. Like his lyrics up until then, chimed Shannon. Yeah, whatever. That's when I saw the guy. There was a collective sigh and a rolling of eyes. Evidently, the veracity of what follows is not entirely endorsed by the other members of the group. I screamed when he knocked on the door, Franklin continued. I mean, middle of the nowhere at night and all. The rest of the band sat quietly while the lead singer told his story. Everyone except Hank stared at the floor. The stranger was dressed all in black and wore a sombrero, which was also black. Like a goth mariachi player, his curly beard was long enough to cover his chest. The most standout feature, however, was the person's incandescent red eyes. This was greeted by a collective sigh, Hank included. It's true, Franklin protested. They lit up the inside of the van when he peered in. It was like being visited by the malevolent spirit of Alan Moore. Once he overcame his initial shock, he asked the stranger if he knew how to start a van. The stranger, in a gravelly voice, told him no, but he could give him something else. He could give him something far more valuable. I'll give you rhymes, he said. It took Franklin a moment to understand what the man was offering. He would give me the gift of lyrics, he said. I would be able to write a song that roused the souls of mortals and speak to their true nature. Well, that's how he put it. Hearing this outrageous offer made Franklin laugh at the time, apparently. The stranger was unfazed by this. Hard to laugh at someone with flaring red eyes, he said, for long at least. The stranger whistled a tune, strange and melodious, like one of those sad Irish folk songs. You know the ones. The next thing you knew, he began speaking lyrics. I couldn't help it. It just came out of me. I knew the phrase, what came next. I knew how everything clicked. There was a theme, a voice, a deeper meaning, everything I couldn't understand before. The stranger laughed once the song finished, a laugh Franklin said he would never forget. Despite the eerie sound, he was convinced of the man's offer. My socks were totally blown off, man. I agreed to the terms right there and then. I mean, would you pass up on something like that? I asked about the terms, but he said that disclosing them were part of the bargain. I didn't point out that disclosing this meant that he already divulged a term, but I thought better of it. He thinks he's Robert Johnson or something, says Shannon. So you don't think his abilities improved miraculously overnight? I asked. Oh, they definitely did, but we think all the lyric writing books and stuff we lent him finally pierced his thick skull, said Shannon. Whatever the truth may be, upon Franklin's return, the band created what would later become their first hit single, Spin Cycle. It was magic, said Alex. I still have it stuck in my head sometimes. Hank grunted. Had a great solo section, yeah, Alex translated. They were on a roll that night. Where there were no songs before, hits like Mucky Sponge, Toaster Danger, Teary Gloves, and of course, Whose Turn Is It? Were born. I decided not to reproduce the lyrics here for copyright reasons, but for another reason that will become clear in due course. Their first album, Domestic Bliss, was born. The record department at Flamingo Industries secured the right in a hurry. Before they understood what was happening, they had a contract, an agent, and a tour schedule. What you always dream of, said Shannon. It really was like magic. Hank emitted a long sigh, followed by a strum of his newly tuned strings. He says we sold out. He hates the mainstream stuff, said Alex. He's just intimidated By success, said Franklin, straightening his woolen bow tie. When did the trouble start? I asked. Was it during the production of the second album? No, way before that, man, said Shannon. Once the song started getting radio time, well, it seemed like crazy rumors at first, at least until we did our first live arena gig. Then it became very real, said Alex. It happened fast, right after the first verse. Hardcore music fans among you may recall an incident at a Glastonbury festival some years ago. Right before the first day rained out, a massive fight broke out in the mosh pit of a warm-up act. That warm-up act was none other than Murky Dishwater. Whatever sparked the disagreement in the pit soon spread through the entire crowd. Strangers engaged in fisticuffs, friend fought family. There was kicking, biting, punching, and screaming in the mud. The band played on. At first, we hoped they'd catch the beat and calm down, said Franklin. Milkin' First is a good song. But we quickly figured it out, said Alex. It was the lyrics, said Shannon. The more words they heard, the angrier they became. Hank grunted. The words are annoying, Alex translated. No, it was much more than that, said Shannon. Whatever they heard in the song was making people lose themselves. In the end, the police had to break things up. They actually played Black Sabbath by Black Sabbath to calm everybody down, said Franklin. Who would have thought, said Alex. The band received reports from all over the world. The songs were making people angry and sometimes even violent. We don't understand, said Shannon. The words are pretty tame, sometimes verging on boring. Tame or not, the songs sparked controversy. Their songs became banned in many countries, and several DJs lost their jobs for playing songs like Asparagus and Mucky Sponge. As things tend to go in the music industry, the moment they were banned, Murky Dishwater became an overnight sensation. Every rock enthusiast wanted to get their hands on a copy of Domestic Bliss. Some say this phenomenon single-handedly saved the brick-and-mortar music store industry. We couldn't sell it digitally, said Franklin. Whatever you copied it to would malfunction or melt. No CDs, no online streaming, no bootleg copies on a flash drive. Unless you wanted to lose a leg, Alex added. We all looked at him. He shrugged. Happened to a guy I know. For whatever reason, the songs only worked on vinyl, said Shannon. The band broke the bank soon after the controversial Glastonbury performance. They had achieved the success they were always hoping for, but something weighed them down. I don't think that I speak just for myself when I say we've always thought of ourselves as the good guys, said Franklin. I've always wanted to give back, make a difference. You know, now that our name and our sound was out there, I wanted to do something good, take the fight to injustice, that kind of thing. The brothers nodded in agreement. Hank sighed elaborately. It seemed that he was starting the process of de-stringing his guitar again. What kind of injustice were you addressing? I asked. Oh, you know, big stuff, said Franklin. Climate change, corruption, unequal wages, immigration, neoliberal hegemony, and quinoa. Those are big issues, I said. Gender inequality, Dot shouted from somewhere outside the studio. Big issues, Franklin nodded. Hank grunted and whispered something under his breath. He thinks music is the biggest issue of them all, said Alex. The band decided to hold charity gigs, where the proceeds would go to a cause close to their hearts. They made several free appearances, including old age homes and schools. Hyperactive kids are one thing, said Shannon grimly, but you don't know horror until you've seen a bunch of oldies throw walkers at each other. He slowly shook his head, his eyes taking a glazed, far-off look. One guy flipped the Ludo board, said Alex, right before he downed a whole jelly. Crazed look in his eyes, man. There's things that will stay with you for the rest of your life. I think the zoo was worse, said Franklin. Hank muttered something that sounded like penguins. He says that he was most concerned about the rulers of Antarctica, the noble emperor penguins. Most people worry about lions, tigers, and bears, but penguins are the real bastards. That was the fastest I've ever picked up my drum kit, said Shannon. One of the buggers ate my microphone, said Franklin. It was custom. And connected, said Alex. He broadcast his stomach sounds for a good 3 hours. It's not funny, said Shannon. After incident upon incident, every public venue banned Murky Dishwater from playing. The zoo banned them from even attending as ordinary citizens, citing irreversible damage not only to the penguin habitat, but to their mental well-being. The dream of giving back was starting to fade. Our album sales were still good, said Shannon. We made donations, that kind of thing. But we couldn't play anywhere, said Franklin. They could only ride the success of their first album for so long. Soon it became clear that a second album was needed. As with most bands who attained unprecedented success with their first endeavor, the band felt the pressure. They had to figure out what made domestic bliss tick, what they thought they were saying, and just what their sound was. Murky Dishwater, Unplugged, took a year to complete. According to the band, 25 songs were simply scrapped or left uncompleted. Tensions ran high, personal lives broke down, and Hank threatened to quit. He didn't leave in the end, said Alex, stating the obvious. He says no one else would get him. To push through the block, the band decided to experiment. They risked changing the formula too much, but they figured it was all worth the risk. Many artists can only discover their limits by pushing them. We decided to include Dot, said Shannon. There was something in the way he said her name. Yeah, we have 2 operatic numbers, said Franklin darkly. We felt compelled to include her. There was a strange tension in the room. They were not telling me something, and they were avoiding each other's eyes. Even Hank looked bashful. I decided to diffuse the atmosphere slightly. And the midnight concert? How did that come about? Franklin rubbed the back of his neck. Just one of the things we signed up for. Empty field, full moon, middle of the night. Creepiness sells sometimes. But I think you'll enjoy it. Hank strummed his guitar. He nodded. Ready, he grunted. I left the band to set up. The only reason I knew about the concert was through their agent, a Mr. Rantworth. He told me about it, and when I set up the interview. Other than that, there were no posters, no announcements, no marketing whatsoever. When I asked them how many people they were expecting, the group shrugged collectively. Just one of those things. Wait and see. The 4 bandmates and a skeleton crew of roadies set up a marquee at the top of a hill in the English countryside. The moon was indeed full. Its silver disk shone over Murky Dishwater as they tuned up. There was no crowd, not unless you counted me. The enigmatic Dot Morse made an appearance. In keeping with the Halloween aesthetic of the second album, she adorned a black wedding dress. She was perhaps slightly more generously proportioned than the dressmaker was expecting, but nonetheless there was an air of the avant-garde. As the hour struck midnight, the band was in position. The drummer counted them in. The speakers whined. Pedals were stamped. Murky Dishwater launched into their new song, My End of the Deal, and Dot stepped forward, microphone in hand. The song and the rest of the night were a bit of a blur. The last thing I remember was a red-eyed mariachi player dancing the night away. Okay, so that's the first story, and as a bonus, I did write lyrics to the one song, which I'm not going to sing because I have no musical talent. So yes, that is the first story in the collection about music, and that's sort of the style you can expect. So now, thank you for listening, first of all. Secondly, does anybody have any questions? I can't yodel. No. Probably yodel as well as Murky Dishwater, which is not well at all. Okay. Any other questions? Pleasure. Yes, and also, obviously, Volume 1 is still available. It's still pretty new. How many books in the series? That is a good question. Some of the stories are split up as the travel story. There's a part 1 in Volume 1 and then part 2. So far, I've got enough planning for at least 4.5. So we'll see. There is a big meta plot building. So some keen-eyed readers among you might notice that there's something bigger going on in the background. Yes, I'll leave that a mystery, but let's just say there's a lot of puzzles and clues in there, and it's all for a purpose. So right now, I'll say there's at least 4 volumes. Okay, I'll try and keep them coming. Yes, so I set myself a very difficult, well, not difficult, I just thought maybe it was slightly less time than I ordered to take to finish this one, so the pressure kept me going. I think for the next one I need a bit. Will my D&D stories become books? Maybe the original stories, yes, because I keep record of everything. Maybe I'll package them together and sell them. Okay. Yes. Megan gets stronger glasses, and you will find the clues and the enigmas. That was a clue. Yes. Any other questions? Did everybody like the story, or do you think it was maybe, or do you prefer a story from number 1? Okay, yes. So I do have another book coming out that I've spent 5 years plus on. Yes, I will post the lyrics. Give me a second. Yes, so I've got another book I spent 5 years plus on. Thank you. Called The Silent Symphony. It's a lot more serious than this one. It is coming out in July. I'm busy revising it for like the 8th time again. But yeah, I think it's ready. So it is about a bunch of people. Thank you for comments. And these are the lyrics. I just think I'm going to be, it's too big for this thing. So you know what, I'm going to put them on my blog. You can find a link to my blog in the description thingy below, including a link to the book itself. But yeah, it's too many lyrics to fit into the YouTube chat. So yes, I'll put them on my blog. All right. Yes, so the Silent Symphony is about a group of young people who travel to a big city in which they try and follow their artistic dreams. But not everything as it is as it seems. So try and think of it, elevator pitch mode, as it is 1984, but if everything had more color and more protesting artists in it. Let's put it that way. Yes. And that will also be on the, if you follow the link, you'll also find the pre-order page for that with some more information. And I'll add more information on my blog when it gets closer to the release date. So yes, volume 2 of the Bright Report is releasing on ebook tomorrow. The paperback is available right now. It depends where you live, because import fees, if you're down here in South Africa, it's not always too great, but there's many options. Right. Any other questions? Okay. Yeah, I think that will be it for now. I will read more stories at some point. Yes, so you like the travel story from the first one. All the clues you're looking for might appear in the next one. When I wrote part 2 of the travel story, it became a giant plot. I had originally planned it just to have 2 parts, and I realized, no, this is maybe more story than, yeah, you'll see. Just read it, and you'll see that it's building towards something as well. The other stories are all complete stories. So yes, mystery. All right. So I think we will leave it there. Thank you for watching, everybody, and thank you for your comments and support and your questions about the lyrics. Like I said, the link to the blog is down in the thing, the description box, whatever they call it. So yes, thank you, everybody. Until the next Bright Report, pleasure. Thank you. Bye.